They've obviously left the school. Zach was fine, so they let him be. They're now at their Zachary's birthday party, which is also a costume party because it's Salem and it's Halloween, so of course they would have a Halloween party. Interior of the study of the Denison house. The sound from the costume party can be heard outside the doors. The grandmother is leading Zachary to the spell book. The room is well lit, and the old books seem to go on for as far as the eye can see. Margaret is unaware that the book is no longer in the study. Zachary says, "What are we doing here, Mimi?" Margaret positioning him to where the spell book should be. "Happy birthday, you are 13 now, old enough to use this book." Zachary says, "What book?" Margaret says, "They must have moved it to keep you from having it." Zachary says, "They bought me a book for my birthday. Next year, why don't they get me cleaning supplies? Maybe a new vacuum cleaner." Margaret says, "Not just any book, it's a special book. It was my book many, many years ago." Zachary says, "Did you give it to Mom to keep for me, or did you lose it?" Margaret says, "Your mother never knew how important the book was to me. I didn't lose it. The book was stolen from me." Zachary says, "Mom stole a book from you? Why did she do that?" Margaret says, "She didn't steal it from me. 3 witches did." Zachary says, "Witches? Really, Mimi? You're starting to sound like Dad." Margaret says, "Has your mother and father ever shown you this room or the book?" Zachary says, "Mom and Dad told me I am forbidden to come in this room. Speaking of, we should go before I get grounded." Margaret says, "I've seen your bully at school. Teachers and parents can't protect you forever. This is a special book. It gives people what they desire most." Zachary says, "Really? Cool. Could it stop Randy from picking on me?" Margaret says, "With this book, you can make Randy afraid of you. Think of how cool you would look to your classmates. They would think you were a tough guy, someone who could protect them from bullies, not a weakling." Zachary says, "Sort of like a superhero, like in my video games." Margaret says, "Exactly. I can show you. All you have to do is help me find the book. I forgot where they said they put it." Zachary says, "Well, will it really make me a superhero?" Margaret says, "It will make you something so much stronger without the cape or the green body." Zachary says, "I heard Dad say it would be safe at the museum." Margaret squatting to look into Zachary's eyes. "Now let's go get my book. What do you say?" Just as Zachary is about to answer his grandmother, Allison opens the door to the study. "Max, what did I tell you about being in here? It's dangerous." Zachary says, "There's nothing in here but old books, and they smell like old shoes." Allison says, "Mom, what are you doing in here? You know we don't let him in here." Zachary says, "Why? Because you think I'm still a baby?" Mimi said, "Some book could give me superpowers. I want to stop Randy from picking on me." Allison says, "You don't need a book to do that. We are your parents. We will help you. We'll make him stop. I will keep you safe, I promise." Zachary says, "Keep your promise? You can't even keep a birthday party a secret." "We will talk about this later. Let's get you back to your party. Mom, you and I need to have a long talk about overstepping." The clock on the study begins to chime in, and it is now 7 o'clock. As Allison walks into the study towards her son, Zachary is grabbed by Margaret. Margaret says, "It's your unholy 13th birthday, Zachary Daniel Denison. Time to end Winifred's reign over my book." Zachary says, "What's going on? I thought you said the book will give me powers over Randy. Who's Winifred?" Allison says, "She is no one. Now let's go. Mother, you need to stop." Margaret says, "I am just getting started. Hold on to something." Margaret does a motion that looks like she is about to throw something on her daughter. Dark smoke blankets Max, Allison, and Zachary. Suddenly the smoke is gone, and the family is now back in the old Sanderson house. Interior of the Sanderson house, present day. The house hasn't changed much. The old house was left just as it was for the tourist attraction. He says, "Wow, how did you do that, Mimi?" Margaret says, "The book gave me the power to do that many, many years ago, just like I told you it would do for you as well." Max says, "Margaret, who are you?" Margaret says, "I'm your mother-in-law, of course." Allison says, "Mom, how did we get here?" Margaret says, "I brought us, dear. The Sandersons are not the only one with gifts, though I'd hardly compare us to be the same." Allison says, "You have always told me stories about the Sanderson sisters and how much you dislike the stories of them. Then why would you want to bring them back?" Margaret says, "That is simple. When the witches are finally dead, the book will return back to me where it belongs." Zachary is walking towards the book. It is surrounded by a circle of salt. Zachary says, "So this is the book everyone keeps talking about. Doesn't look that great. Is that a real eyeball?" Margaret says, "The witches took the eye of an innocent boy to form the curse. A child's innocence protects the book by magic. As long as they are, for the lack of a better word, alive, the book will never be mine." Zachary says, "That's gross." Margaret says, "You see, there are two kinds of witches out there, those that are evil and those who are pure. Unfortunately, I cannot cross the barrier of salt to retrieve the book. If you get the book from me, I will show you just how powerful the book can make you." Allison says, "Don't do it, Zach. It's a trick. The salt protects the magic of all witches." Margaret says, "Not all witches are evil, Alessandra." Zachary touches the book and the pages begin turning. Zachary looks to be scared of what the book is doing. Allison says, "Zachary, no." The pages have stopped on the black flame candle spell. The pages turn bright orange and fill the room with light. As Zachary picks up the book to hand it to his grandmother, he drops the book on the floor. Before he or his grandmother can pick up the book, the room begins to shake violently. The windows in the house are all busted out and shattered along with the lawn. The front door blows open. The ceiling begins dropping dust onto the ground below. Allison grabs Zachary and pulls him closer to her. 3 dark figures begin to come into focus. They are standing in the corner of the room. Winifred, Sarah, and Mary look older and their clothes are destroyed. Mary, touching her face, "Winnie, how is this possible? We died twice. I still feel the same searing pain." Sarah, putting her hands on Winifred's face and inside her mouth, Winnie, are we ghosts?" Winifred bites Sarah's finger. "Sarah," pulling her finger back quickly. "Ouch, that really hurt, Winnie." "Does that feel like you are a ghost?" Winifred is looking around. She is standing in front of one of the signs. Her body is blocked half of the sign, so it looks like the sign says "Welcome back." "I do not yet know how we are back. Margaret, what have you done?" Winifred says, "Well, hello, Peter. Long time no see. You as well, Wendy." Sarah says, "Are we in Neverland?" We are in Salem, sister. They are in costumes. We killed you once, you old hag. Admitting to murder, are we? That will get you 25 years to life, which I believe is what you cost us. I want my book. Where is it?" Margaret bends down and picks up the book, and the Sandersons instantly recognize her face. Margaret, "On the contrary, Winifred, the book belongs to me. I did, after all, write most of the spells inside of it." Winifred says, "Margaret Putnam, in the flesh, whose is to be questioned. Last I recall, you were banished and powerless by the master himself." Margaret says, "Banished, yes. Powerless, I think not. Seems as though the black flame candle has brought you back again. How convenient. I know that the only way to stay alive is to kill the Virgin's heir, which I cannot allow you to live, nor kill my grandson." Allison says, "Mom, what are you talking about? I don't understand. What is going on here?" Margaret says, "Allison, you are the daughter of the great Margaret Putnam. See, unlike these witches, I don't require a spell to stay young. My hands pull the life from anyone I choose. In exchange, I stay alive. Winifred's silly potion is based off my power." "You will not get away with this," said Winifred. "I still have my powers." Winifred tries to hit Margaret with her powers. Margaret deflects it onto the ceiling. The ceiling collapses onto Max, Allison, and Zachary, knocking them unconscious. Margaret says, "You think yourself to be quite powerful, silly girl. I will show thee what real power is." A dark cloud of smoke begins to form in Margaret's palm. Quickly it enlarges, spinning what is inside the room. Winifred says, "Smoke, what are you going to give us, cancer?" The Sanderson sisters begin being sucked into the cloud as it spins like a vortex. Winifred tries to zap the witch, but it is blocked, and the dark witch sends the sisters flying out the window. Flying high above the house, the Sanderson sisters were just thrown from. The dark witch looks from their bodies to appear in the water. 3 bodies surface in the water. She lets out a sinister laugh and then vanishes into a puff of dark smoke. Margaret reappears in the house. She removes the rubble from her daughter. Grabbing Zachary's arm, she pulls him closer to her. Allison and Max wake up during the commotion. Allison says, "Let go of him. You have to start explaining yourself." Margaret says, "What shall I explain first?" Allison says, "How about for starters you tell me when you became a witch?" Margaret says, "Oh dear Allison, that story would take far too long to explain. Let's just say I've had an old feud with the Sanderson family for years. I'm simply taking back what is rightfully mine." Max says, "Zach, buddy, come over here from that wicked witch." Margaret says, "I am a wicked witch. Looks like a house was dropped on you. Those are usually saved for wicked witches. Besides, Zachary's coming with me. Allison, what? No, he's not. Margaret says, care to stop me, Allison? Ah, yes, you have no powers. Max says, you're not taking my son. Margaret, the black flame candle calls for the virgin's heir to be sacrificed in order for the Sandersons to stay alive. I've waited far too long to take back what is rightfully mine to let some teenager ruin my plan. Allison says, you told me you bought the Sanderson Museum at an auction. Is that all a lie? Margaret says, I did buy the house at auction, 3 days after the Sanderson sisters were hanged. Thackeray never mentioned another witch to us. He said he was guarding the house. Margaret says, that's because I never went inside the house. I was standing in the crowd as Winifred announced to the village that I would be back on All Hallows Eve. So I waited until a virgin came along and lit the candle. Little did I know his heir would bring them back. Allison said, you said it was your book. Margaret said, I got tired of being second best to Melanie Sanderson. She and her 3 daughters practice witchcraft in a small cottage. Max says, Melanie Sanderson, as in the mother of the Sanderson sisters. Margaret says, yes, I feared they would become stronger than I, so I told the town of the witch who lives in the cottage in the woods. She was hanged, and I was sent away with my memory erased for turning on a sister. Margaret says, as fate would have it, a small child was found missing an eye in the woods years later. He warned me that there were witches in the woods, and that I needed to leave before they find me. Margaret says, I tried to see his face, but was hidden by a robe. He said the witches took his eye. In a moment of enlightenment, all my memories came back. Unfortunately for the boy, I had aged to be about 100 years old. With a touch of my hand to his face, his life became my youth. Max says, what does this have to do with the spell book? Margaret says, the innocence of the child is what keeps the book protected by magic. Why do you think Winifred calls my book to her side like it is a child? Allison says, you are evil. Does Daddy know? Margaret says, your father knows what I am. I brought him back to life years ago. So in case you get the bright idea to try and kill your dear old mummy, Andrea will lose both your parents forever. Max says, I will take down anyone who keeps Zachary away from his parents. Margaret says, Max, your friend Thackeray was turned into a cat for centuries. I can do far worse than make you a feline flea bag. Max grabs a handful of salt that is lying on the floor. He then tosses it onto Margaret. She screams and then vanishing, taking Zachary with her. Allison says, Zachary, what are we going to do? Max, we will get him back. He is a fighter like his mother. Allison says, how did I not know that my mother was so evil? If she's so dark and evil, then what does that say about me, the daughter of a witch? Max says, you are the most kind and gentle person I have ever known. This just proves that it is nurture over nature. It does not mean you are evil. It does have me thinking, though, something that Winifred said years ago. She called you a clever white witch. Maybe you're a good witch. Maybe there is some information in the book at the house. It could help us find Zachary. Allison says, Max, I'm not a witch. I can barely cook, let alone use magic. Allison says, the party. How are we going to get there? How are we going to explain this? Where did the Sandersons go? Max says, calm down, breathe, take a deep breath. Danny's on her way to the party. I just texted her and asked her if she was close by. Allie will get Zachary back. Margaret will not hurt him, not when she needs him to stay alive. Allison says, I guess you're right. I just hate to think of him in danger because of all of this. We should go before the Sanderson sisters return to their house. Grab the book and let's go. Max and Allison grab the book and rush out of the house. As they're walking down the dark road, they hear the sisters talking. Max and Allison hide in the bushes. As the sisters return to their house, they are soaking wet. The sisters are almost at the house when Max's cell phone rings. Max panics and tries to answer it before the sisters hear it. He's too late. Winifred spots the couple hiding. She sends Mary and Sarah after them. Winifred says, Sarah, Mary, after them, get my book. Sarah saying at the same time as Mary, no. Winifred says, what? How dare thy defy me? I am your older sister. I ordered you to go after them. Mary says, your plan last time got us killed. You let Sarah and I meet their son without even trying to help us. Winifred says, I was forced onto hollow ground. Hast thou forgot what that does to dark souls? I was turned to stone before meeting thy doom. Sarah says, I had salt thrown in my eye. Mary says, I had to ride a vacuum cleaner and they held the cord. Sarah says, well, I got hit in the face with a tree branch. Mary says, oh yeah? Well, I got. Winifred interrupting her sister's fights. Will you two be quiet? They are getting away with my book. We can settle this later. after we get my book. This time around, I do not plan to die. Now come after them. Okay, so I'll stop there really quick. What I did with that, obviously, Margaret is Allison's mother, who is apparently a dark witch who was in the beginning, which I thought is a nice way to tie it back to if they do a flashback of the sisters being hung and they say, my ungodly speaks to you on All Hallows Eve when the moon is around, all that. When she's talking to the village, if they show a flash or if they put Margaret in the background, so that we actually know what she looks like now as opposed to then and now. They could probably use the same actress from it and then just change her face a little. I don't know. But so that's what I was doing with that. The scene where I was talking about them being flown out of the house, the way I had to read that made it a little confusing. Basically what she did is the sisters are in the room, like their living area, I suppose, and she casts out so the smoke comes out of her hand like this, and it engulfs the entire room and circles it. So when you think about like Thor 2, I forgot what the name of that movie's called. I have it over there. I should know it. Basically, the cloud that they're fighting in is what I'm thinking of with this, that dark, sinister, like gritty dust. So the room is basically spinning. She, obviously deflects it. It pulls the ceiling down on the people that are there besides her. And she, in turn, throws them basically in this cloud out the window. So they fly over the Sanderson house and into the lake or ocean. Well, they're in Salem, so it would be an ocean, by their house. And that's why she's above the house flying over them, looking down. And, she thinks they died, so she leaves. So that's what that was doing. So it got a little confusing with talking about them being in the house and thrown into water. Like, it's because she poof, be gone type thing. So that explains a little bit of that one. Hope that cleared it up a little bit. Danny's car driving to Max and Allison. Danny, I got your text. Where are you guys? I'm coming up on the house now. Max says, Danny, don't come here. The sisters are following us. We have the book, and Margaret took Zachary. Danny says, how did you get there? What do you mean Margaret took Zachary? I can slow down and you two can jump in the car. Did they come back? Max says, I will explain it later. I see headlights. Is that yours? Danny, maybe. I'll flick my lights and see. Danny blinks her headlights and Max and Allison notice the car. Winifred Sanderson sees this as well. Max says, yeah, I see you. Just slow down right there and I'll jump in. Be ready to floor it when we get in the car. Winifred says, oh, Max, I know what thy plan is. It won't work if we beat you there. Max says, Danny, go. Winifred knows that you're in the car. Just leave. Danny speeds up the car as she is about to pass up the Sanderson sisters. Mary pushes Sarah in front of the car. She hits the windshield and then rolls off the back of the car. Danny slams on her brakes, and that is when Winifred grabs Danny through the window. Sarah gets up and adjusts her dress. Max says, running up the hill to Danny's car, Danny, leave her alone. Winifred, my, young Danny, seems as though you have grown up since the last time I saw you. What was that you called me? Sarah says, ugly. Mary says, Sarah, be quiet. Sarah says, I swallowed my gum. Danny, well, if the shoe fits your hideous feet, then wear them. Winifred says, I will teach you to call people ugly. And who is this gentleman? Parker is looking at Mary, who is standing at the passenger side window. He looks over to Winifred, and she is taken back. Winifred says, why, if it isn't Thackeray Binks, all grown up. Parker says, my name isn't Thackeray, it's Parker. Winifred says, my mistake. Your name may be Parker in this life, however, it was Thackeray in another. Perhaps it's time history repeats itself. Tell me, Parker, are you allergic to cats? As Winifred begins to laugh. Interior of the Sanderson house. The aftermath of what had just taken place is obvious. Glass is covering the floor. Smoke still lingers. Winifred and her sisters are pulling Danny and Parker into the house. Winifred shuts the door behind them, and Sarah and Mary tie the couple up to the old chairs. Danny says, let me go. Haven't you learned by now? Your plans never work. Do you not remember the last time you tried this? Winifred says, I will admit, child, that I was a fool all those years ago. My sisters and I have seen a glimpse of the future, and honey, you had better buckle up, as Winifred begins to laugh. Parker, so you are the Sanderson sisters from the stories and stuff. Sarah says, and stuff? Parker says, well, I mean, I heard the tales, but I didn't actually believe them. It just seems like a bunch of hocus pocus. We'll call it what you will, but we are far from being stories. You of all people in this village should agree. Agree with witches? That's a little far-fetched. Why not make him see, Winnie? Parker, make me see what? Winifred, see what we have done to you in the past, for interfering with our plan. Danny says, wait, so you think Parker's Thackeray reincarnated? How can that be possible? Winifred says, well, unfortunately, good souls move on to a better place. I know this is that mangy Thackeray Binks. Danny says, even you three aren't that strong. Besides, Thackeray was a cat 25 years ago. Parker obviously isn't 25. No offense. Winifred says, you simple-minded girl. The Binks family line continued after the siblings were missing. When their souls moved on after my curse was undone, their souls simply found their bodies in this time. Now be quiet. Parker says, wait, I have a sister? I've wondered why I can't remember anything about my childhood. Winifred is whispering with her sisters in the corner. They are trying to remember a spell. Sarah begins dancing in the background. Mary and Sarah dance around Winifred. As her two sisters loop around her, Winifred sticks out her foot and trips them onto the floor. Winifred says, perhaps this will jog your memory a little, sisters. Twist the bone and then the fat. Is it the copper malika misket? Trim him of his baby fat. Give him fur black as flack, just like this. Nothing happens. Danny and Parker snicker at the lack of effects. Winifred is upset. Her sisters look confused. Winifred says, our power must be weakened without the book. No need to worry, though. The fool who has my book will be coming for his sister soon enough. Max and Allison are looking in the window and spot Danny and Parker tied together. Winifred notices the two out of the corner of her eye, but does not react. Max, I'm going to go set them free. You get the sisters out of the house, then take Danny's car and come get us. Allison says, Max, you can't go in there. Winifred interrupts Max and Allison and says, I have a better idea. Winifred raises her hand and green static courses out of her hand. Wrapping around Max and Allison, Sarah and Mary quickly knock the two unconscious. When Allison and Max come to, they were hanging above a cauldron in the rusty cages. Winifred is flipping through the pages of the spellbook. Max says, let us go, you reincarnated turd. Allison says, reincarnated turd? Really, that's what you came up with? Winifred says, silence! Winifred uses her magic to spin the cage that Max is sitting in. Smoke begins pouring through the bottom of the front door and the windows. Margaret appears out of the smoke and looks pissed. Margaret says, I thought I killed you three for good. Winifred says, nothing thy does is good, mediocre at best. Margaret says, I will turn your bones to ash, you red-headed banshee. Winifred says, try as you may, it will not be so easy for you. I have my book. Care for me to reintroduce you? Winifred opens the book, and the force of the magic that comes out of the book hits Margaret so hard that she instantly turns into smoke and vanishes. Exterior of the Sanderson house. Margaret is floating in the air. The dark magic that she possesses is now being pulled from her body into the book. It looks as though her shadow is being pulled from her body. With the last bit of magic being drained from her body, Margaret drops to the floor. Winifred, who is lying under rubble, takes the opportunity to get revenge. She hits Margaret with all the magic she can conjure. Winifred is laughing as Margaret falls to the floor. Allison screams and runs over to her mother's side. Anger is obvious on Allison's face. Suddenly the book opens and the dark shadowed magic is drawn into Allison's body. She stands up and the smoke begins to flow from her hands. It envelops Winifred and her sisters. The Sandersons are being drained of their magic. They are aging very quickly as the Sandersons are about to meet their doom. Allison's mother and father appear beside her. Margaret says, this is not you. Don't let the darkness control you. Allison's father says, honey, listen to us. Magic comes with a price. You saw what happened to your mother and I. Think of your family, your husband and your son. They need you. Margaret says, please listen to us. If you kill the witches with dark magic, you will become evil forever. There is no going back. Do not make the same mistakes I made all those years ago. Allison, in a deeper voice, you were too weak to handle the power. I plan to rid the world and the next of these three. Max says, Allison, listen to us. You don't want to do this. Stop this before it's too late. Allison takes one hand away from the Sandersons and points it towards Max. He is instantly surrounded by smoke. His body cannot be seen. His coughing and pain can be heard. Zach says, "Mom, this isn't you. The book has you under its spell. Fight it. I need you. Mommy, please." Allison looks to her son, and her expression changes. Pain is seen in her face. Allison says, "I love you so much." Margaret says, "Zachary, destroy the book." Zachary, "Me? I'm just a kid. What can I do?" Margaret says, "You're innocent. The book's protection will not work on you. You can finish this once and for all." Zachary grabs a burning piece of wood and stabs it into the book. The Sanderson sisters are dropped from Allison's control. Winifred sang at the same time with her sisters, "No!" The book begins burning, and orange dust begins swirling around the book. The force of the wind is getting stronger. The dust consumes the room. The dark magic is being sucked back into the book. The Sanderson sisters are shown aging back into old women. Allison cries out in pain as the magic is being pulled from her. Max, Allison, and Danny are thrown from the house onto the lawn as if an explosion happened. The house is being sucked into the orange dust coming from the book. Once the house is completely gone, the book flips and turns into small specks. Then without a sound, the book is no longer seen. A huge explosion of sonic waves and winds come from where the book once appeared. Allison says, No. Zachary, where are you? What have I done? Zachary!" Max says, grabbing his wife, Allie, look." Allison's mother and father appear where the house once stood. Margaret says, "I'm so proud of you, my darling. You did something I was not strong enough to do." Allison says, "But look what it cost me. Zachary, where are you?" Allison's father, "Sweetheart, look lying under that tree." Max and Allison run to Zachary, falling to the ground in relief of emotions and tears. Waking Zachary, Allison says, "Zach, wake up. You did it. You saved us." Zachary talking very softly. "I told you those video games were a good thing." "Zachary, are those witches really gone?" Allison says, "Yes, they are gone for good. The book, their house, all of it is no more. Thanks to my brave little man." Zachary says, "Mom." Allison says, "Oh, sorry, my brave teenager." Max says, "You have your mother's courage and my brains." Danny says, "Don't insult the poor kid." Turning to face Parker, Danny wraps her arms around him and kisses him. Allison stands up and walks over to her mother and father. She begins to break down in front of them. Allison says, "Mom, Dad, what am I going to do without you? I thought the book being destroyed reversed the curse." Margaret says, "I am so proud of you. You saved me and your father. I was consumed by dark magic. I wish I didn't have to leave you, but we are now free. The curse has been broken. My soul can rest peacefully. We will always be with you whenever you are sad or need us. We will always be there, watching our grandson grow and our granddaughter as well." Margaret places her hand on Allison's stomach, then Allison places her hand on her mother's. Allison's father kisses her daughter one last time before they fade away. Max and Zachary walk over to Allison and hug her. She begins to cry and laugh. Max turns to face her. Max says, "Allie, what's funny?" Allison says, "Just something my mother said had me thinking about the last couple of weeks. I've spent most of my mornings sick. My feet are swollen, and I can't control my emotions." Max says, "Well, that's to be expected given everything that's going on." Allison says, "Babe, think about it." Max says, "Are you pregnant?" "You're pregnant." "She's pregnant!" Danny and Parker walk over to Max, who is swinging Zachary around in a joyful moment. Parker says, "Congratulations to you both." Danny says, "Well, Max, you definitely can't light the black flame candle now." Zachary says, "What does that mean, Dad?" Max says, "Let's save that conversation until tomorrow. Right now, let's go home and celebrate." Max, looking to Parker, "You have saved this family so many times. I don't know how I could ever repay you." Parker says, "Give me your blessing to marry your sister." 6 months later. So with that one, I did fast forward a little bit. And what I did, because there is more story in between there, but to get the moral of the story, I guess, the witches were defeated, and this is how I wanted to do it. The in-between is where I haven't, that light bulb hasn't fit in perfectly to give them a little bit of, drama before the climactic moment, which is what I just read. So basically, the book was destroyed by Zachary because he was a child, and the curse, the protection curse, didn't work on him, so he was able to destroy it. Because he did that, all the magic and all the spells were gone. And that was one thing that the first one did that bothered me. Like, when the witches died, Billy was still alive. Like, he should have been like poof, like just dust. So with this one, when the book is gone, the witches go back to just old women, and then the house basically sucks them up. And then because the magic was taken from Margaret and she was killed by Winifred, she obviously died. And then because she died, Allison lost her dad too. So this is the ghost of them talking. So anyways, and about her being pregnant, I wanted to throw that in there just because when I was writing her being sick in the very first pages, I was like, she's sick in the morning because she's pregnant, because we want to have another child, so that, not to say 13 years from now they would be like, hey, let's make another one of those movies, because, whatever. But it's just as a joke to just be like, oh great, they're going to do another sequel. But that's not, I just wrote that just because there's going to be another 13-year-old coming. So anyways, about Parker and Danny getting married, I wrote that he was late 30s, early 40s. I meant more so that he was in his 30s, like 35, 36-ish, like not quite 40. So that way it's not like she's still 17 and he's 17 and she's an 8-year-old, because that would be weird. But that they're close enough in the age to where it would work, like 36 and, 28, I don't know. Anyways, so that's what I was doing with that. It might be a little weird, but I couldn't think of anything else to bring him back into it. And plus, the actor who plays Thackeray is on NCIS, I think. I think that's the show. But anyways, he's attractive, so who knows? Maybe he'd want to do it again. So I wrote him a part. If you're watching this, you're welcome. 6 months later, exterior wedding ceremony. Warm April afternoon outside where the Sanderson house once stood. In the place of an old Sanderson house now stands a beautiful garden with the white wedding altars. 2 sections of seating are divided by a white carpet. The chairs are creamy white. Yellow flower petals are spread around the wedding location. The chairs are sectioned 6 chairs per row, and there are a total of 10 rows. The seating is so large because the town has all come out to celebrate the Sanderson sisters' house being destroyed. Danny's wedding is a celebration for a new beginning for everyone involved. Danny says, Allison, is my brother here yet? Allison says, he's on his way. He said he just had to pick up something before he came. Allison says, he will never admit it, but he was honored that you asked him to give you away. Max would do anything for you. So would I. Danny says, this must be hard for you, losing your mom and dad to magic. Allison says, both my father and my mother love me deeply. I got to say goodbye. I know they will always be around. Allison and Danny hug and wipe their tears away. Danny looks over Allison's shoulder and sees her brother walking up to them. Standing behind him is Danny's mother and father. Danny says, Mom, Dad, I thought you were on a cruise in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Danny's mother says, we wouldn't miss this for the world. Danny's father, you look beautiful, honey. Where's my sweet 8-year-old girl? I don't see her anymore. Instead, I see a very wise young woman who resembles her mother. Will you allow me the honor of walking you down the aisle? Danny says, Dad, I'd love that. Danny's mother says, where is the groom? I want to meet the man who's lucky enough to marry you. Danny's father says, yeah, where is he? I'd like to meet him too. Max says, don't worry, Dad. I've already given him the if you hurt her talk. Danny's father laughs. Okay, I'm going to go find him and introduce myself. Danny's mother says, wait, I'll come with you. I want to meet him as well. Danny's parents walk around the tent and disappear from view. Danny says, thank you, Max. This means a lot to me to have them here. Max says, you're welcome. Max kisses Danny on the cheek, and then he and Allison go to take their seats. Danny says, I love you, jerkface. Max turning to smile at his sister. You have to love me. I'm your big brother. The guests have all taken their seats. Danny's family is seated on the left side of the aisle. Parker's family is seated on the right side. 3 little flower girls come walking up the aisle, followed by a sharply dressed Zachary, who is the ring bearer. Zachary smiles at his mom and dad before taking a spot at the base of the altar. The wedding music starts, and Danny and her father begin walking up the aisle. Danny is focused on her groom standing at the altar. Danny's father is rubbing her hand. Preacher says, who gives this woman away? Danny's father says, her mother and I do gladly. The guests laugh, and Danny gives her dad a funny look. Preacher says, we are joined here today by the friends and family of Daniel Dennison and Parker Preston. The location the couple has chosen comes from the strong belief that everything has a new beginning. As many of the town can attest, the house that once stood here is now a distant memory. With the destruction of the evil that once resided here, peace, hope, and an undying love now resides. Daniel is a young surgical intern in Boston, and Parker is a veterinarian here in our very own small town of Salem. The couple has said many times that their love has found each other in this life and in the past, and like a true soulmate, they were destined to find each other. With this being said, let us begin. Preacher says, do you, Parker Preston, take Danielle Dennison to be your soulmate in this life and the lives you are destined to share? Parker says, I do. Preacher says, wonderful. And do you, Daniel Dennison, take Parker Preston to be your soulmate in this life and the lives to come? Danny says, I do. Preacher says, Danielle and Parker, please repeat after me as you place the rings on the left hand. With this ring, I thee wed. Parker and Danny say at the same time, with this ring, I thee wed. I'm not about to read that 4 times. Forget it. Parker says, a promise is formed that... The preacher says, a promise is formed that as long as we are together, these rings will be a symbol of our love. They both read it. It is with great pleasure that I pronounce you husband and wife. Parker, you may kiss your bride. Parker lifts Danny's veil and softly kisses his new bride. The preacher says, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, it is with great pleasure to announce to you Mr. and Miss Preston. May their love be an inspiration to everyone. God bless. Danny and Parker turn to face their guests, looking to Max and Allison with a grin that reaches from ear to ear. Max says, Danny looks so beautiful. She isn't my little annoying sister anymore. Allison says, she'll always be your little sister. Speaking of little sisters, I have a feeling this one's a girl. Zachary says, don't think I'm babysitting for free. This is going to cost you big time. Max kisses Allison lightly on the cheek as he rubs her growing belly with one hand and uses the other hand to pull Zachary into a gentle hug. Now, I'll stop there because the next part, I really like this song. And Starship is from one... I first found them because of the movie Mannequin, which had Kim Cattrall in it. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Go watch it right now. Like, stop this video, go watch it. But there's a band called Starship, and there's a song that they have called Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, and it plays at the very end of that movie. And the way that movie ends, it makes you feel like, wow, this is awesome. So that's where I wrote this next part. Anyways, softly starting as Starship's Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. The camera follows the newlyweds as they walk up the aisle past their guests and attendants. Everyone is now standing to celebrate the church. Camera gets to the very last row. Sitting together are 3 women. One is wearing a green dress. The other is wearing a purple dress. And sitting beside her is a woman in a red dress. Mocking, Sarah says, Mr. and Mrs. Preston. Winifred sharply elbows her sister. The back of the sisters is shown only. Ever so gently, Winifred raises her hand to adjust her hat. Danny and Parker walk past the 3 seated women. A side view of the sisters is shown, and a light green static is seen running between Winifred's fingers. Fade out. The end. So, that is my script, guys. What do you think? Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully it was worth waiting 2 years to hear all that. I know there's a middle piece of it missing, but for the most part of it, that's the script. I wrote it just because, like I said, my friend loves Hocus Pocus, and for her birthday, I wrote this script for her to have, and so I wanted to share it. I don't like that the witches were gone in the first one. Like, that's it. Like, we don't know if they really did make it or not. Like, that's it. The book's awake, but I didn't say much. So this is a good way to start fresh, so that if you know how Hollywood is, and especially with Disney, they like to reboot things, like with Star Wars and Marvel and all that stuff being tied together, the moneymakers. So if they were to start a new chapter with Hocus Pocus, this gives them something to go off of, because it ends with the sisters being alive. Danny and Parker obviously are married, and they're starting their life together, and who knows where that goes. They may have children, and it could continue. Who really knows? I threw in the Sarah joke about Mr. and Mrs. Preston. That's the Sex and the City reference, in case you didn't pick that up. When I was writing the character of Parker, I wanted his last name to be Preston just because I knew at the very end, I knew how I wanted the movie to end, first off. And I was like, it's going to end with the wedding. I didn't know who was getting married. I just knew it was a wedding. And I knew that the sisters were going to be in attendance at the wedding, and that the very last scene of the movie was Winifred with magic. Like, because I want people to know they still have their power, they're still alive, and all hell's about to break loose. But we don't know why or how. It is, So when I wrote it, I wanted Sarah, because she plays Carrie in Sex and the City, and she married Mr. Big, which is a mistake, but that's a whole other thing. And his last name was Preston. So I wanted her to be the one to be like Mr. and Mrs. Preston, because it's like a joke to that show. It's like a nod. I also threw in a lot of Marvel and Avenger superhero jargon in there, because Disney does own Marvel now. And the Hulk, and I think I said green skin and a cape, so I was thinking of Thor and the Hulk. And then I also talk about future stuff like teleporting and all that stuff, like Star Wars, because Disney owns Star Wars, and of course they can make that joke because they own that company. So, but anyways, hope you guys like it. Subscribe to my videos for more videos. I wrote a few more scripts for some other TV movies and stuff like that, so who knows, maybe I might start reading some of those. Again, I'm not an actor. I wrote this as fan fiction. I do not own any of the characters, and I love Disney. And Disney guys, if you're watching this and you want to be like, we're going to give Riley a job and he can write it, well, then look me up, because I will write it. I'll bring my paper and everything. So, hope you guys have a great day and a happy new year. Bye.